Hello everybody. Thank you for joining another episode of this podcast, which is called MMT or TMM.
TMM, the
No, I have to actually check.
technology
I don't
mind
remember.
meld.
I don't remember any. Oh, TMM,
TMM.
technological mind meld. Yes, there you go. Yay. That's how new we are. We don't even know the same name of the podcast. TMM. So Matthew, we wanted to have a chat about maybe this time a little about embedded devices and off grid.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, hi everyone, Matthew Smith here. So I'm in Grenoble, southeast France. David, you are literally on the other side of the Alps from where I am.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's hard to get through those things. No, it's a joke. Yeah, we have tunnels now,
yeah,
so we can go
yeah.
through tunnels.
But you're on another. You're literally on another side of a very big mountain range in Europe that's well known. So that's cool.
Yeah. It
Yeah,
is funny.
absolutely. So, I mean, I think that's interesting. So, I literally a week, 2 weeks ago, got back
Mhm.
from 10 days ago, got back from a 3 week trip to South Africa, which is
Hmm.
where I was born, my home country. There's a couple of reasons for that trip.
Do you speak Afrikaans?
Ik praat een beetje Afrikaans.
I love it so much.
Yeah, my command of what was my second language, because my mother tongue is English, obviously.
Uh,
No, obviously, right? It's kind of no. It was my mother tongue, but so my second language, I studied Afrikaans for 10 years, right, at school from like age 8 until 18.
okay.
So which is yeah, it's kind of what you
Yeah, no,
do.
I mean, I love that the sound of that language. So the same thing like when people like ladies hear like someone from the UK and they freak out. Oh my God, your accent. I have the same thing, but for Afrikaans. I don't know why. It just sounds in my
Okay.
head like
Well,
awesome.
what we could do for a future podcast, we could invite a couple of Afrikaans speakers
Okay, I like it.
onto onto the show. I've already got someone in mind, by the way.
Perfect.
Yeah, who has a very interesting take. Comes from a technology background, but also today focuses on coaching and creating entrepreneurs,
Okay.
particularly youth who are struggling to find employment. So instead of
Mm,
looking for a job, how do you create your own business? Anyway, he runs an
perfect.
organization called the Human Entrepreneur. So I'll give a shout out to him. Hi, Willem. His name's Willem Goos.
Okay, awesome.
There we go.
Yeah, that'd be very interesting. That's super cool idea. Especially if you're an emerging country like economy, and have I guess not everything is yet established. You can actually create your own job, right? Is that
Well,
the
correct.
case?
Correct. I mean, this kind of maybe relates into what we could be talking about off-grid, embedded, new ways of connecting, and new ways
Hmm.
of establishing connection. So connecting, but it's also the connection part, which I think is important.
Right.
You know, um, what I wanted to say is the old challenge, and you hear this across the world, and we hear it today. We've heard it for the last, I don't know how many years. But
Hmm.
it's like create jobs, right? Create employment, create, some kind of meaningful contribution into the economy.
Hmm.
Um, and I think if we look at where we are in Western Europe, there's an issue with youth underemployment.
Hmm.
Okay. And if we look outside of Europe, we can see that there's entire segments of populations in different countries that would love to be meaningfully employed or have some kind of meaningful economic activity,
Hmm.
but there just aren't enough, actual jobs to employ people. The jobs haven't been created. So we talk about job
Ah,
creation, and there's a lot of talk about it, but where's the action, right?
right. Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, one of the things that is a potential solution is, instead of thinking about I need to find employment, create a business and sell and generate value
Hmm.
and use that as your economic activity. Anyway,
Right.
that's
Yeah, no, like that. I mean, uh, I don't know if I did it on purpose or I don't know because I also started my own business 6 years ago because I was not able to find employment.
mm,
That was one of the reasons. Like I was talking, doing interviews, and I was not able to pass those interviews because they were still very crude, and you basically
mm.
had to memorize everything. There was no concept of Google and use that, and do you know how to solve problems and just find a solution online and glue them together. That's not what people do normally, and so that's why I never was able to pass anything. And then I decided, okay, I can go to the same company or from the back door as a consultant, and that's fine. But
Yeah.
going as an employee, no, it's impossible. So, yeah, I just decided, you know.
But this is this you touch on something which I think is quite fundamental inside you know the overall economy is
Mhm,
that yeah, it's in a way a lot easier to again work as an independent contractor, so as a consultant or as a service provider,
mhm,
than it is to actually sign an employment contract. And there's some let's say some sectors or some disciplines which are actually very well suited for being a service provider
mhm.
as opposed to being an employee because it's not necessarily a core business
Right.
activity inside the buying organization. So, and this is what I find really interesting when you look at opportunity is
Yeah,
that,
because this is something that I see when it comes to my type of work when I work with AWS. Because once everything is set up and everything is automated, and you have developers just working on a website and using a bunch of services in AWS, there isn't
mm,
much more. There isn't a need for me to exist in that company. Only when, for example, after a few months, they go like, "Hey, we'd like to use this new service. Can you set it up for us so we can use it?" And yeah, there's no point of having one employee that keeps on just sitting and waiting.
yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And, if you then take that a step further, you can look at entire business processes,
Hmm.
which again can be again outsourced. And there's some very common examples. If we look at how many larger companies in Europe today outsource their, for example, their receivables processing, so all of the things to do with, for example, invoice management.
Hmm.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I just that occurred a couple of months ago with one of my clients, which I got a notification saying, hey, instead of submitting your invoice to an internal function,
Hmm.
you need to sign up on this portal, which is operated by this service provider,
Hmm.
and you submit your invoices into a third party platform. And that third party platform then is responsible for verifying the coherence of the
Hmm.
invoice. Does it
Okay.
match a purchase order number? Are the amounts correct?
Oh, so okay, so they would have in the
correct?
system already like, oh, this contractor is working for us, and so that they already can match everything and make sure that
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
not anybody like randomly sending invoices and you're just paying them because they're just receiving them.
no. There's a whole process. I mean,
Yeah, because I
it's
remember there was, I think, a guy. I want to say like 10 years ago that was saying that who was sending invoices to Microsoft that were completely fake,
yep,
and Microsoft was just paying them automatically because we receive invoices, so we have to pay all these third-party companies, right? And nobody was questioning them.
it's very rare. There's also a couple of really, I would say, sort of crazy anecdotal, examples where you have people that create companies which have the same name, for example, as a public service. So the good example here in France is Trésor public, right? So the public treasury. So in other words,
Okay.
the tax, basically the
Right.
place which receives tax payments.
Yeah.
And being able to create a fictitious entity or a fake entity that can receive invoices. And so you have that kind of fraud where you can have a legitimate billing, but it goes to the wrong place. Or you have an illegitimate billing that goes to the right place, but under the wrong circumstances. But
Right.
it's quite rare today because normally you have some controls in place, and those controls have been tightened for about almost 20 years, ever since the Enron scandal in America.
What
So
was
I don't
that?
know if you remember Enron. Enron was a company that had very poor corporate governance. They were doing a lot of crazy off-balance sheet deals, and their way of working was not very clean at all. And they created there was it was basically fraud at on a massive scale, and this caused the collapse of Enron, and that took down other businesses as well. And in the aftermath of that, there was a act that was passed in by the USA Congress called the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. So I don't know if you've ever heard about something known as SOX compliance, SOX
Yes.
compliance.
Yes. Yes.
So SOX compliance is from the Sarbanes-Oxley Act.
Ah. Okay. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
So SOX, right, is stands for Sarbanes-Oxley,
Ah.
which were the
Okay. That's
two.
interesting.
Yeah, which were the two what are they called? I was about to say members of parliament, but that's for that's a
Okay.
European.
You're getting super technical now.
Yeah. But the basically not senators, but the House of Representatives, right?
Oh.
You know,
Okay.
yeah. So anyway, the two elected officials who sponsored the bill was Sarbanes and Oxley, right? Anyway, so
Ah. So
Sarbanes.
there was their last names.
Yeah, they were their last names. Yeah, so that's
Okay.
what it's called. It's Sarbanes-Oxley Act, right? So when it talks about SOX compliance, um, this created an interesting framework for having controls, and you had to have basically basically a three-way control or verification. So basically that there's a quotation. All right, so it's basically a proposal, right, or a contract. So basically,
Right.
some element that says this is what we're going to do, this is how much it costs, and here's the terms and conditions. That is then referenced against a purchase order. Okay, and so then there's a purchase order number or something in his system that is a purchase order against that particular proposal or quote or contract. And then there's an invoice, and that invoice has to line up with the purchase order, and the purchase order has to line up with the proposal, and those three items have to match. Otherwise, you're non-compliant, and you could get fined or go. The officials of the company could go to jail. There's a whole bunch of sanctions that exist in the
Right.
United States. But that had a ripple effect across the world, particularly for larger companies. So large companies have this very kind of heavy process. That's why procurement sometimes is very long with large companies.
Right. Okay. Got it.
And also why you have outsourcing of business processes where there's a service provider that acts at scale and does this on behalf of many of their customers.
Right.
Yeah. So it's quite normal, for example, to send an invoice. For example, I'm a French service provider. I'm working with a French enterprise customer to send my invoice to an email address that's received by someone working in Poland,
Okay.
who is going to process the invoice, verify compliance, and then basically, once that's been pre-verified, send a notification to the customer in France, who's going to then validate it and then approve and then come back. And so there's a whole weird process there.
Like the internet and the
Yeah,
world, like it's amazing place.
absolutely.
That's
Funny how.
crazy. Yeah, like even a simple thing like invoices goes there, goes somewhere else, it goes comes back, and then someone else check it, resends it, and it goes all around.
Yeah.
Mhm. When you think about it, yeah, like, you know about it, but when you start thinking about it, you go like, wow, this is like even simple things are
Mm.
yeah.
And this is very much something which you find in larger sized,
Mhm.
companies, and depending on how we are set up in terms of the service that we provide or the
Mhm.
products that we sell or the activity we have, very often we're going to end up dealing with sometimes larger size companies, or someone has to do that at some point, right? There's
Mhm.
large, medium, small, right? But the smaller you are, the less heavy your processes are, and the more
Right.
informal your processes are, right? It's a little easier for you and I to basically agree, hey, we're going to do something, um, you know, uh, and agree
Mhm.
and shake hands on it and exchange money for something that's of value, and
Right.
that's it. But because we run our own business, we still have some obligations, some formalities.
Mhm.
You still have
Yeah.
to account for your activity. You still have to do your bookkeeping.
Right. Yeah. No. But so, out of curiosity, so how do you work with big clients, and how often? Because yeah, you were traveling last time we did the first we recorded the first episode. You were traveling in France somewhere, right, to
Yeah,
do an installation.
yeah.
And so how often do you do that, and how does it work? Like, yeah, let's start with how often does that happen? Like, well, let's put it a different way. Because you do embedded solutions that are hybrid solution where you have the cloud and local processing, correct?
Hmm.
Right. So how is that process working? Like the client says, like, "Hey, I want something," so you develop it, of course, in house where you are there in France, in your shop, and then you have to go to install it, and you cannot send the product just to the client and say, like, "Hey, this is it. Here are the instructions. Enjoy." Or is it better to just go there and do it yourself?
So both are possible. But
Hmm.
in this particular case, for this particular activity,
Hmm.
the um, installation and some of the final steps of integration.
Okay.
So, again, just to distinguish between an installation and integration, and then also commissioning. All right, these are different
Hmm.
terms that we use. So, again, so what we make, these gateway systems,
Hmm.
are a sub assembly. So it's a sub assembly that is part of a larger piece of equipment or a larger set of equipment.
Hmm.
And so, again, what we had agreed, and this is all part of agreeing on a scope,
Hmm.
and it's based on expertise, experience. Again, is this something that the customer should do in house, or is it something that a service provider or an integrator should do as part of their scope? And
Hmm.
again, you have a discussion about this, and you work out what's the best arrangement
Hmm.
that it again offers the most value, and it provides the least again provides the least risk, and um, what works and what is continuing to work is that my company is involved in the final step of integration
Hmm.
as a way of ensuring that the deliverable, the total set of equipment, is set up, is
Hmm.
finished, and
Right.
is installed and is operational correctly, right?
Mhm.
And so that's a value added service that we do.
Okay.
And it's
And then after that, you just manage it remotely.
And so there's a remote management, and that's where you have some shared responsibility as well. So
Hmm.
this is where it gets really interesting, particularly with larger size customers.
Mm-hmm.
So you again, it's the whole idea of black box versus white box versus gray box. Okay.
Okay, I know what's a black box is. What's a gray box and white box?
Yeah, so these are just three different kind of like ways of looking at or classifying the degree of openness, right? A black box is closed,
Mm-hmm.
it's proprietary, it
Mm-hmm.
is could be provided as a service,
Mm-hmm.
and normally the end user or the customer
Mm-hmm.
doesn't actually get to touch the internals or be part of operating the internals of that particular component or that particular piece.
Mm-hmm.
That's black box.
Right.
White box is where it's completely open, okay,
Okay.
and the customer has full control over the individual details and components
Mm-hmm.
of that particular component or piece.
Right.
And then a gray box is where there's it's semi-open, right? So there are parts, and this can either denote that there's a shared responsibility, a joint responsibility,
Mm-hmm. So does it
or
mean that, for example, they have a piece of equipment that they want you to create a solution to control? So they have that equipment that they know how it works and how it operates, and then you do a little bit of logic to make it work, and that's why this is a gray box where you do your thing and they do their thing. Is that an approach?
it's also where sometimes, and this is quite often the case, there is a requirement to have some in-house piece of software
Mm-hmm.
or some at least something that has
Ah,
been constructed in-house deployed
right.
into that system, right? So
Mm-hmm.
again, it's very simple, right? The end-to-end system would not work unless there was some software and again some credentials as well.
Right.
So what you find, let's take an AWS example, right? So, and this is interesting when it comes to the IoT space with some of these platforms that exist there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is whose account in AWS does the actual equipment out there connect to?
Uh-huh. What do you mean by that?
Okay, so whose account, right? Whose environment?
Oh, account like AWS account, you mean?
AWS accounts. Yeah, when
Okay.
I say whose account, whose AWS account?
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. So
So
if you
is it the
are,
client or your account that you manage for them?
so if you assume that I'm a black box service provider, right? It's something
Mm-hmm.
completely proprietary, and there are numerous examples of complete solutions that you can purchase as a customer today, and
Mm-hmm.
it's you know you get hardware. That hardware has a communication capability. You literally get some instructions. You plug it in. You turn
Mm-hmm.
it on. It connects, and it basically is waiting, and it gets set up. And then you are given access to some kind of web-based application, some
Mm-hmm.
platform, and that platform application is basically controlled 100% by a service provider. That's an
Mm-hmm.
example of a black box end-to-end system.
Right.
And that software that the platform runs on lives on that service provider's AWS account if it's hosted inside AWS.
Mm.
Okay.
So this great thing is also a mix of they might say like we want to use our account,
Yep.
they want to use your platform to put their own software. We
Hmm.
just manage the hardware, and so they don't know how the hardware works, but they can push their code to that hardware and all of that. You can mix and
Yes.
match however you want.
Yes. Yes. And so this
Mm.
becomes interesting where you want to separate concerns
Mm-hmm.
between infrastructure and then application,
Mm-hmm.
or let's say domain specific applications.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And that gets interesting where you're working in a actually in a kind of a multi-tenant environment at the
Right.
edge, which
Right.
could happen.
Right. Oh,
Um,
okay. Interesting. Yeah.
there's some good examples on this, right? So this comes back down to what we started with, where you said, "Hey, I created a company because I couldn't get a job," right? And I ended up going by the back door to be a consultant. So
Right,
if
exactly.
we look at certain size companies, particularly larger ones, they tend not to do everything inside the company.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they work with a lot of contractors. They work with a lot of service providers.
Mm-hmm.
Here in France, that's known as an entreprise extérieure, right? Because you're
Okay.
external to the actual um,
Enterprise.
the actual end user company, which is known in
Mm-hmm.
French as the entreprise utilisatrice, right? So that's
Okay.
the end user company,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you've got an end user, and then you've got service providers who are external to that end user company.
Right.
So if you think about it, right, in a factory, in a chemical plant, in an oil refinery, in some kind of industrial complex, you
Mm-hmm.
may find that you have multiple companies working together basically to achieve some results which ultimately are going to benefit the end user company,
Mm-hmm.
but there's shared risk and shared responsibility.
Right.
Okay, so this raises some interesting questions on how that applies for IT, how that applies for a cloud centric architecture, where we know that multi tenancy is something which we kind of again assume is all good in the cloud, in the public cloud. But what
Mm-hmm.
about multi tenancy at the edge?
Right. Mm-hmm.
On actual hardware that runs inside the factory because it has to be on site.
Right. So how do you go about when it comes to so what when it comes to the hardware, what type of hardware do you use to build those systems?
Well, specifically for the the example I was giving earlier, and when we were last doing recording the podcast
Mm-hmm.
during that particular trip. So this is a very compact gateway.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so it's designed for low power computing because we don't
Mm-hmm.
have, and also very compact physically because we don't
Okay.
have a lot of space.
Mm-hmm.
But the let's say the processing, the memory, the storage requirements, and even the network requirements is quite, I would say, quite modest. It's not heavy.
Mm. Right.
So it can be a system, and we basically build the solution around the same technology that is inside a Raspberry Pi.
Mm-hmm.
It's the
Okay.
same processor architecture. In fact, we use the Raspberry Pi compute module as the
Okay.
platform, and then have designed the electronics that go around it.
Oh, okay, so you take that version that is basically just a module that you then have design on board for it and just put it in to give just CPU and memory.
Correct. So it's basically we have a motherboard or a
Hmm.
card that carry a carrier board that
Okay, so
basically
it's custom made for that solution, and then you just use the compute of.
yeah, from Raspberry. So
Right.
it's not customized. It's not a custom hardware just for one customer.
Hmm.
It is definitely a hardware solution that can be used in other environments, but
Hmm.
it is very specific in that currently the package, when we're talking about the whole thing, is
Hmm.
designed to work in a what's known as hazardous areas. So typically where there's a risk of explosions due to gas or
Okay.
dust.
Okay. All
So like
right.
an oil refinery or a petrochemical plant, or it could work in a
Wow, I didn't even think
pharmaceutical
about it.
factory. Yeah,
Right. So you have to have those design tested to make sure there's no sparks, no heat, like
yeah,
the components cannot heat up to a certain point, I guess.
correct,
Right.
correct.
Wow. Okay. Oh crap. Oh wow. Okay.
And
That's
that,
interesting.
yeah, exactly, and that's what makes the Raspberry Pi's, the Broadcom system on chip that is used for the Raspberry Pi very interesting, because it actually provides a very good compromise between performance
Mm-hmm.
and electric power consumption So it allows us to create this package which doesn't require a very large, let's say, housing to
Mm-hmm.
protect it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it also allows us to do things with much less, let's say, it's a lighter system for on the electrical side of things in terms of what needs
Right.
to be protected. So again, that's great. We've got a and by the way, I mean, just I'm kind of bragging a little bit, but we actually have this solution deployed already on 3 continents, right? So in Europe,
Nice.
in the Americas, in particularly in the United States and Canada, and then also in Asia
Oh, okay.
as well. Yeah.
Interesting. But going back for a moment, when it comes to the hardware and the previous discussion that you don't want to do everything yourself and you want to outsource. So I think also the nice thing about using the compute module that they provide is like it's already tested, meaning like
Mhm.
it's already has all the tests done to not have arcs, sparks, and all of that, and then you just have to test your own board to make sure that it has no issues. So you know that at least the Raspberry Pi is good and just you can focus on the custom stuff.
There's definitely it's definitely useful using pre-certified components
Right.
when you're creating a design, and then the rest of the special stuff you have to do is on ensuring that the total package, okay,
Hmm.
and again, it's electrical, it's mechanical, it's radio frequency as well,
Right.
because we're using both cellular communication, so LTE, 4G, as well as Wi-Fi.
So you were talking like we didn't record a podcast last week because no, sorry, the first episode you were saying like, oh, we can wait until I get to the hotel because in the place where I am they're like welding,
Yep.
right? And so welding creates a huge interference issues when it comes to radio of any kind. Like every time you do a spot weld, it's like just disrupts any communication that
Yep.
you might have around, right? So how do you work around that if you have an LTE? And yeah, like are those modules already designed to withstand an environment like that, or you have to do something custom, or you have to just make sure that you're aware of it when you're sending your data that you're going to have a lot of disruptions in the communication.
There's a so um, one of the really nice advantages of where we are with cellular communication today, okay,
Hmm.
is the use and the systematic use now of what's called MIMO, right? So multiple in, multiple out, or
Hmm.
path diversity for on the radio side. Okay,
Okay.
so this is was the game changer between the previous generations of cellular technology and where we are today and where we are going in the future,
Hmm.
because it's just getting better all the time, right?
Right.
But being able to use MIMO, all right, and then what's coming is also what's called beam forming as well. But the
Right.
way that you are able to handle and deal with interference within the signal path
Hmm.
is getting a lot better. So what we
Oh.
found, and this is just from practical deployment and actual field use, field testing,
Hmm.
is that LTE really, really, really holds up very well in noisy environments like
Oh.
chemical plants and oil refineries. Even
Interesting.
when people are welding and there's a lot of metal. So there's a lot of noise, right? You've got electromagnetic interference.
Yeah,
So,
because all those buildings are just steel and nothing else, so that must be awful for communication.
well, yeah, yeah. But you've also got rotating machinery, so motors and
Mm,
compressors. So basically, you've got parts that, again, have got, magnets
right.
and again electromagnets, right? So you've got magnetic fields that are changing. You've also got sparks and other things. Even if the sparks aren't are protected inside the house,
Right.
okay, you'll still have some kind of electrical disturbance in the environment. So that's
Mm.
EMI, electromagnetic interference. And then the other thing, which is really even more, has an even greater impact on signal propagation, is where you have signals that bounce off obstacles.
Mm-hmm.
So in an industrial environment, factory, a warehouse, a chemical plant, you've got a lot of metal buildings and structures. And if
Mm-hmm.
you think about it, right, a radio wave is going to go in a straight line, basically,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to, and some of it is going to go through an object, but
Right.
part of that signal is going to bounce off the object, right?
Right.
It all depends on what the property of that material is.
Right.
Okay. So what happens when a signal bounces off, right? It gets reflected back. It may change angle, all right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you remember basic high school physics, right?
Mm-hmm. Let's see how much I remember.
Right, but if you remember basic high school physics, right? We know that we've got a basically a sinusoidal waveform. We've got a waveform that changes amplitude.
Yeah.
Okay, so this isn't a constant amplitude signal, right?
Mm. Okay. Right. Yeah.
Okay. Typically a radio wave is going to be based, or at least the carrier wave is a sinusoidal form. It's a sine
Mm-hmm.
wave. So if I have two waves that are slightly out of phase, okay,
Mm-hmm.
all right. So when I talk about phase, basically this is where my 0 point starts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if I've got one wave and I start at t0 and then at t0 comma 1, I've got another wave that starts.
Oh, okay.
Basically, those waves, when they are superimposed on each other, are going to basically cancel each other out partially.
Mm.
If you have a
So
wave that is
the signal is going to get weaker.
the signal, the total signal, the sum of those two
Yeah, the
signals
sum is going to be
is going
weaker.
to be weaker, right?
Mm.
Again, you could have an extreme example where if I have a one sine wave and I have another sine wave that is 180 degrees out of phase.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, if I have the part
It's
that
flip.
goes up top, right,
Yeah.
it goes down and then comes back up. So
Oh,
if
okay.
you look at that, that's a full 360 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the 180-degree point is where, for example, I start, I go up, I come back down on my
Mm-hmm.
wave. That's
Yeah.
180 degrees. Let's say I start another wave that arrives 180 degrees out of
Mm-hmm.
phase. It's going to be
Yeah.
going up when the first wave is going down. So it's the
Oh,
exact
okay.
inverse. It's the exact
Right.
inverse of the
So
first
that's
wave
canceling completely that one
that
part.
completely cancels it out.
Right. Oh, okay.
So that,
So
yeah,
interesting. So when we're talking about the radio wave reflecting out of an object, the same radio wave, it's weakening its own signal because it's bouncing, and now the frequency is like
exactly.
imposing on the source, and the source becomes weaker. And
Exactly. And because we're dealing also with a modulated signal, okay, so
Mhm,
again, this is also another major advancement in the radio technology that we use today, both for Wi-Fi and for cellular, where we're using things like orthogonal frequency division multiplexing, right? Or
okay,
quadrature
I get it.
amplitude multiplexing, right? So there's a number of different ways that where you can basically again encode the actual, let's say the actual data that you're
Hmm.
carrying over radio, the way you're encoding it and then using it to modulate a waveform. I mean, this is
Hmm.
just basically, if we unpack all the physics, and again, I'm trying to keep this simple, right? It's not about,
Right.
this also is not my area of like deep expertise. I just
Hmm.
happen to have studied, you know, a bit of physics.
Okay.
And I have an engineering background, and again, it's an interesting topic as well.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, I have a obviously my carrier, and I'm going to be
Mm-hmm.
modulating my carrier wave so that
Mm-hmm.
I can carry information on that wave. That
Yeah.
it's the same principle of radio, same principle of
Mm-hmm.
TV. It's the same
Mm-hmm.
principle also of sound and music as well, right?
Mm.
Because we're,
Okay.
you know, when you hear me speak and when I hear you speak, right, we're actually modulating a sound that comes out of our mouths, right? The way that we're
Uh-huh.
changing our vocal cords and our lips and our tongue, etc., it modulates a basic signal.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Makes
This is
sense.
the amazing thing about the human body, right? Or the mind
Mm-hmm.
and the body is that we're able to influence, using muscles, we're
Yeah.
able to influence air coming out so
Right.
that we can convey information. And so we apply
Right.
the same thing on radio, um,
Mm-hmm.
communication. And anyway,
Mm-hmm.
so yes, so you're dealing with complex modulated signals. So you're never going to have like a total cancellation, but you can
Okay.
end up with a pretty nasty cancellation or a pretty nasty attenuation. That's the right word of a
Okay.
signal. So anyway, so MIMO in a nutshell, so multiple in, multiple out, allows us to compensate for that by having more than one antenna, by having a diversity system.
Okay.
Because what's going to happen is we're going to receive or we're going to transmit, and we're deliberately transmitting signals from two different physical points.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and we know that things are going to bounce around, but basically we can use the difference in reception and what is being transmitted and what is received. We can use
Mm-hmm.
those differences to again reconstitute a better signal.
Okay.
Okay, and that's also where with all the emerging technologies as we move into the sort of 5G new radio era and basically the next revisions of LTE. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
because again,
That, does this is 5G going? How is 5G going to improve? I'm assuming it's going to be an improvement over LTE, right?
I,
Um,
so
no.
maybe I could stop you. So
Yeah. Yeah.
5G is also LTE, right? So LTE, okay, is the continuum.
So wait a second. What's the difference between 4G, LTE, and 5G?
Okay, so 4G and
Yeah.
5G are really marketing terms like 3G and
Okay.
2G. They just literally characterize that this was the fourth generation of cellular
Yeah.
technologies, and 5G is just a label that's been applied to say this is fifth generation.
Okay.
However,
So the LTE is a more technical term that tells you more specifically what we're talking about.
yes, but in terms of the standards, so the GSMA standards and what is known
Hmm.
rather strangely as the 3GPP, which is the third generation partnership project, which is
Okay.
which basically brings together stakeholders that are basically right industry standards for cellular technologies.
Yeah.
Still called 3GPP, right? But you've
Hmm.
got different releases of the standards.
Hmm.
So what's more important is to track the release 13, release 14, release 15,
Oh,
release
okay. So
16.
you just check which protocol version we are on. So they're basically agreeing on this is the new set of standards.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little bit broader than just protocol because you've also got the actual radio, you got the physical layer, you've got various
Okay.
different subsystems within the overall set of standards, but
Hmm.
they do
Right.
form a cohesive whole. And
Hmm.
normally, those who supply equipment or systems or implement them
Hmm.
in a telecom operator's network,
Right. Yeah.
they will basically produce equipment or produce software that runs on standard hardware that basically
Hmm.
complies with these releases of standards.
Right.
Okay.
I see.
Anyway, if we look at LTE, so LTE, all it stands for is long-term evolution.
Ah, okay. Interesting.
So that's all LTE stands for, is just long-term evolution. Okay.
Hmm.
And LTE is a good acronym to keep in mind because basically what was decided, and this was the major shift between what was the third generation of
Hmm.
cellular communication and the fourth generation. So the difference between the 3G and the 4G was that 4G was intended to be the first in a series of long-term evolution of standards
Hmm.
and to provide a
Okay.
continuum. Yeah.
So it should be more like LTE version 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then instead of 4, 5G, 6G, 7G.
Exactly. But I think the telecom industry are so far up their own um, whatever
Hmm.
with marketing and with again some of the kinds of things that they hold dear to their you know
Right, yeah, no. I mean, they started this whole 3G. I mean, they started with like 3G was like the popular brand name, I guess, that started everything. There's even like in Italy a company called 3G, literally,
yep
that still, now sell phones that are 4G. So,
that,
yeah,
that's right, and if I'm not mistaken that is a related party to an operator in the United Kingdom called Three.
oh, so it started in the United Kingdom, right? Well,
Yeah.
okay, so maybe
so,
they're the same thing,
so
I
three
guess.
so three in the UK was created by a little company called Hutchinson Whampoa. And
Ah,
Hutchinson Whampoa are in Hong Kong, so telecom and industry, etc. And what made Three different in the UK is it was the very first network that was pure 3G. They basically did a clean build of a 3G network.
hmm.
There was
Right.
no kind of upgrade. Um,
Oh, okay, I see.
yeah, and so when you start looking at sort of examples of networks and new network deployments, it's very interesting to keep an eye out for
Yeah.
operate.
Yeah, but that was an unfortunate like name because I
Yeah,
don't know why they even chose that. Like you're locking yourself a little bit with your name, what how you grow and what you do.
exactly. It's the same thing with products, right? So, in a way, where things have become totally confused is in the United States with 4G and 5G because the this was companies like T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T. They all jumped on the bandwagon and they wanted to market new capabilities. So because up until the, if you like, the sort of like the I would say it's kind of like the second half of the 3G era or standards,
Hmm.
right? So it was kind of later on as 3G, the third generation, was being deployed. There was a
Yep.
technology that was called HSPA. Okay,
Oh yeah, there was, yes.
all right, and HSPA plus, and
Right.
it was around that time when the standards in North America, particularly US based telecom standards, and the rest of the world, which were following the more European GSM, the global system for mobile
Right.
set, started to
Mm-hmm.
converge. Because before then,
Mm.
for data services, we had things like EVDO, EVDO, and CDMA, right? Which
Right.
again were very specific and followed very much North American sort of like kind of practices. And what US telecom operators did is they ended up basically marketing HSPA plus, particularly dual carrier HSPA plus, as 4G. They said, "Hey,
Mm.
it's 4G. It's a fourth generation." Because for them,
Right, because it was faster, right?
well, it wasn't just that. It was also they basically were saying, they were claiming that actually this is a fourth generation for us. Because what
Mm-hmm.
they were selling as 3G with their EVDO, CDMA stuff wasn't
Hmm.
actually based off the same standard as the uh, basically the original before we had this HSPA. Um, and I'm losing my command of acronyms right now, but it was the old. You sometimes come across it, right? But it basically was the technology between Edge, the enhanced data system, and HSPA plus.
Yeah, well, it wasn't that what wasn't that 3G? Like because I don't remember which technology was it. Maybe what was because there was a situation that they introduced, this 3G new capability, but it was basically a hack where they were just getting
Yeah,
more bandwidth
yeah.
to create the speed needed to kind of fake 3G, like the 3G speeds. And it was, I don't remember which
Now,
part of.
so I just had to Google to refresh my memory, but the acronym that I was looking for is UMTS.
Oh, UMTS, and that was the thing that you were able to put together more bandwidth by using old technology, and that was like I think the protocol for that. And if I remember correctly, the situation was like if someone connected to a GSM tower, so to a, not a GSM, so to a tower, with a phone that only had, for example, Edge, you would have Edge speed even if you had the modem to go faster, right? There was something fishy about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, if we go back and rewind in time and we look at like sort of how data evolved on the cellular networks, I mean it's really crazy because back in the original days of the early days of GSM,
Hmm.
um, basically you had what was known as CSD, so circuit switch dial up.
Okay.
So this was like making a modem call over a regular telephone copper network.
Right.
You were limited to 9,600 bits per second, 9.6 kilobits per second.
Hmm.
Because again, this had to do with the channel that was available for carrying voice. So literally, what you're
Correct.
doing is you were modulating and doing your data,
The data into audio, and you're just pushing that.
basically pushing it through the same channel that was available for carrying the voice call. And
Hmm.
so that was okay. I did that. I remember feeling very, very, very proud of actually making a data connection like that on a train in France in 1999. It was like super cool. I was like I think it was my second trip to or third trip to France. It was like super
Let-
cool. So I was like, wow, man, I'm
Wait a
treating
second. Did you
myself
have a
here.
laptop
I
and
had
a
a
modem
laptop.
separately?
Yeah, I had a laptop and I had
Oh, no, on
a
your phone.
yes, and I had an Ericsson SH888 phone, which I don't
Wow.
have anymore. I should have kept it as a museum piece.
Ah,
But
exactly.
this is one of the few phones at the time that basically had a little serial port plug on the back,
Hmm.
and you basically plug
Right.
that into the serial port on your laptop, on your computer,
Hmm.
and you could
Yeah.
dial a data connection and use it in the same way you would use a fixed modem on a copper phone network.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And
Super nice.
so anyway, so that was okay. I mean, it's just fast enough to like maybe download an email. You can use the internet today using that kind of speed.
Yeah. No.
But that was one way of doing it, and that was before you had, it's kind of like in very early days when GPRS was kind of like, around.
Hmm.
GPRS was the very first packet switch data
Bucket.
service,
Yes. Which. Yeah.
okay, where you could provide like a native, connection. Um,
Hmm.
and effectively, the access to the internet was then done via basically via the mobile operator. Remember, my data
Hmm.
access when I was dialing using CSD or circuit switch dial up, I would be placing a call to a modem on the other end on a normal fixed phone line.
Right.
So my access to whatever network I'm connecting to is literally on the other side of that other modem. It's got nothing to do with the carrier, with the mobile
Right.
phone operator.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, they didn't manage the modems.
Yeah,
They're
that's
just
right, on the
provided
other
the
side.
lines and that's it.
Exactly, exactly. Man, when I think about it, we've come a hell of a long way in 25 years, right? When, in terms of
Yeah.
the way we have data and the way we actually can connect and establish connection. It's amazing.
Yep, yep. Yeah, it is. It's
Yeah.
crazy. I mean, also like, so the interesting thing is like for sure. Sometimes since I live in the mountains, sometimes I see when people build solutions like an iPhone or build applications like maps or music or whatever. Very few times I see people that are developing this stuff take the time to go into locations where there's like poor connectivity and actually test what happens if the connection goes in and goes out. Because lots of time you have, for example, a situation where you lose the connection and the application doesn't resume, doesn't check if there's a connection, that there's a new connection, and that sometimes doesn't work correctly. Or the most annoying thing, you have maps that still need an internet connection to reroute or check for something new, right? Um, and in my opinion, we actually went a little bit back when it comes to at least navigation, because I remember the TomTom days when TomTom was actually making devices for the car. And then we went, and they were offline, so you could have been anywhere. You always were rerouted to the right place, no need for anything. And now, if you now you have to think, oh, I have to go across 3 or 4 countries. Will I have a connection, right?
Mm,
To make sure that I'm always have a map working. And for example, Apple Maps doesn't have any sort of caching. Google Map has it, right? But there's also a limited range that you can select because it's a square, which is annoying. Why they don't select across the route, 10 meters apart from the route itself? They could do that.
yeah.
So yeah, we went from you're offline and you cannot navigate anywhere to you can navigate. It's super convenient. It's in your pocket, but if you don't have an interconnection, forget about it. Like even now, GPS is in the some like especially in the iPhone. No cellular connection, no GPS signal because we use the eGPS system, and we won't download the almanac from the satellites, and we won't wait for that, right? So no connection, no GPS, um, which sometimes it's just mind blowing. That's why, for example, for my hiking, I just bought a Garmin, so old fashioned, regular GPS, no fancy stuff, and you have to wait, those 3 minutes to get a log once you have all the data.
This is fascinating because it gets me thinking about, some of the things that we for sure take for granted. Um, And when we go out of urban environments where, again, all these things are really, we can take them for granted. Where I'm sitting,
Hmm.
you're sitting, right? It's a given that we've always got mobile signal. It
Yeah.
has to be really unusual. It has to be either a complete, how can I say, a complete disaster or meltdown at the mobile phone, the telecom operator.
Yeah.
And I mean, there have been
Yeah, but
one or two
but
incidents, but
right, but I see this like because in the mountains, at least where I live, there's like pockets of there's literally no signal because there's too many. The mountains are covering the signal, or even like for example, simple thing: you go through a tunnel that takes 30 minutes to drive through, and they don't repeat the signal.
yeah,
Good luck doing anything with that, right? So yeah, once you live in places like this, you start to realize, oh, wait a moment, I have to think a little bit ahead, right? I have to have maybe a backup device that is offline. I need to maybe use an app that is actually has offline capability that are actually good and not just this crude version of Google Maps.
yes,
Um, yeah, and then you start realizing, for example, you want to do a new route in a place that has no connection. So yeah, you can get to a place one way. So you start from your home, you have a connection, you make a route, great, you go and check the new place. Then you want to come back and there's no connection there.
Mm.
Then what you do, you start driving towards home, more or less how you remember it, and hopefully you get a signal to then actually route you to the to the correct place, right?
Yeah,
And take you out of a problem,
I had
which I've done a bunch of time.
I had a couple of I had some experience of that during my trip to South Africa, and I think
Ah,
what was also very interesting there was um, so yeah, so this whole thing of like traveling outside of your your normal country, right? And
hmm,
you know, in Europe, we're at least fortunate in that we don't have any roaming charges anymore.
right, yeah.
So, you can come over to France, I can go over to Italy, you can go to Germany, we can go to anywhere and sort of pretty much in the entire EU, plus a couple of
Hmm.
countries which are not EU members or were, but
Yeah, like Switzerland, it's always like, oh, do I have enough money to survive Switzerland and drive through there?
um, Dave, do you have
Because
not have roaming with Swiss operators?
no, I do have roaming, but since I have a SIM card where I have like uh, it works only in the European Union,
Oh,
right? So you have
okay,
data. So in Italy, you have 120 gigabytes, and you have to go outside Italy, you get, I think, six, right, in your package, and you have to pay extra for it. So I pay my €9 and I'm happy.
right.
But if I go to Switzerland, those 6 gigabytes don't apply, and they charge you. So if you have money in your account, you can still use it. Once you end up without those money, the connection is lost
So,
completely, right?
so I guess this all comes down to like what has been negotiated between your carrier,
Those
your
companies,
operator,
yeah, exactly.
their
Yeah,
what
and
they
so I
call
always
their
have like €50 in that account. So if I have to travel to Switzerland, I don't have to think about it. I just can just go, and sure, I survive. They would charge me like €10 for one day or something like that.
night.
But at least I can drive and I can use maps, figure out
Yes,
where I am.
but what I have to do is that and again one of the operators is on is kind of covered in the in the subscription I have, but
Oh,
not
really?
the others. Yeah, yeah, it's kind of interesting. So, I
Oh,
basically have to ensure that I force. If I go to Switzerland, I have to force myself to only be on that operator and not any others. Yeah,
right.
yeah, which is
Interesting.
kind of
That's a good
curious.
point. Huh.
Yeah, yeah. So that's
So the operator inside of Europe could make their own deals with Switzerland directly to allow a little bit of flexibility. Yeah.
yeah, 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 and it's the same with again the other territories that are not EU member states. So Norway, for example, Iceland.
Hmm.
Generally speaking, there are some alignment, and but you will find exceptions, and it depends. And sometimes operators are going to take advantage of that to charge you
Hmm.
more money. It's part of
Of
the
course. Yeah. Yeah.
the crazy thing is that ever since the European Union basically stopped or basically forbade roaming
Hmm.
charges inside the EU,
Hmm.
all the operators have increased the price, the tariff for roaming outside of the EU.
Oh, interesting. Didn't know
Yes,
that.
absolutely. Particularly to countries which are perceived to be more exotic. Okay, so it's very rare
Mm.
today, and I'm speaking from a French perspective. So, for example, most of the French operators today will also include North America, Canada, USA in the same
Hmm.
roaming like package for the rest of Europe. Because if you
Oh.
look at the agreements that are between American operators and European operators, their way that they handle settlements, it's something that is very, very, very low. It's a low cost, right? Almost zero, right, for the
Mm.
operators, right? So they
Right.
basically offer that as a convenience, right? And it's a sweetener.
Oh.
Yeah. Um, but go to South Africa or go to the Middle East or go to Egypt or to I mean
Hmm.
there's plenty of interesting crazy examples. But my So my operator wants to charge me 13 euros per megabyte on roaming. Can you
What?
per megabyte, right? So
What?
yeah, 13 euros per megabyte in South Africa with my French operator that I'm on. It's insane.
Like, like, do they do it on purpose because they don't want to deal with to do the billing in South Africa between countries? Like, what?
They're just greedy, right? Because there's absolutely zero reason. I mean, I have other um, solutions. So
Jesus, like 1 megabyte. Like, what the? Like, I don't. Wow.
yeah, so can you imagine, right? You
Like just checking the weather will destroy you.
correct or taking some photos and a couple of videos on your phone and then forgetting that you've got automatic backup with Google
Yes,
Drive or with Dropbox, right? Or actually,
exactly.
in my
And
case, I use both, right? So I end up with a
oh
double
my god,
upload. Um,
that's crazy.
yeah, it happened to me once, by the way, in Malaysia about 10 years
Mhm.
ago, about 10, 11 years ago. I went off to do a customer project, and
Uh-huh.
I had set my phone to automatically back up photo. Well, actually, I hadn't set up to automatically back up. I actually deliberately decided to back up when I was on Wi-Fi,
Uh-huh.
and this was in the days before you had some fine grained control, and
Okay.
the Wi-Fi failed in the place I was staying. Basically, the connection cut, and I had forgotten. In fact, I hadn't really forgotten. I had deliberately kept data roaming on because at that time I did have some bundle, right, of
Uh-huh.
data for some very limited communication.
Right.
But I ended up getting a phone call as well, right, from my operator saying, we just want to let you know that you've just gone over 1,000 euros on your bill, right? And do you want us to block or whatever? And I was like, what?
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Did you have to pay that?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
Holy shit. Wow. Okay.
I mean,
Crazy.
it was a business expense, but it was an unexpected business expense. So normally I would never budget that amount. So there are other ways of doing it.
Right.
So I've gotten into the habits, and actually, it was just simply the circumstances of that project. I wasn't able to get hold of a local SIM card. But normally,
Mm-hmm.
what I've been doing for a long time is literally you go and buy a prepaid local SIM card, and you
Yeah,
then
yeah.
recharge and buy a data package and load that
Right.
up, and it gets quite affordable. I mean, like in South Africa.
Yeah, no, thankfully you can do that. I saw how much is in South Africa SIM card like that?
So for 100 gigabytes of data that's valid for a month, it'll cost you about 60 euros.
Yeah, it's a little bit expensive.
Yeah, for 100 gigabytes, right? But if you want
Yeah,
less, I mean, obviously it'll cost you kind of less. But
right. No, because in Italy at least with you can get 120 for no more than 10.
yeah, absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. So it's true that data in the domestic market in a country like South Africa is ridiculously expensive compared to what we have. I mean,
Oh, so it's more expensive in general across the board.
yeah, across the board. Yeah. Now
Okay.
you do pay more for prepay, and a lot of people end up in this false. How can we say it's kind of a prepaid trap, all right? And this is another thing that's perhaps worth talking about is the illusion, right? And this is always
Mm-hmm.
the thing that basically actually keeps poorer people poor,
Mm-hmm.
because you're going to provide a product that again is, let's say, the quantity of what you're getting
Mm-hmm.
is less, right? The
Right.
pricing is set up in a way that it's something that's affordable, but in terms of value for money compared to another type of, again, package,
Right.
you're actually over time going to be paying a lot more.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. So yeah, it's like one of those. Instead of paying every month, you should pay at the whole package for 1 year, right?
Yeah,
So you
exactly.
get
So if you sign on
it's
on a 2 year contract, right, and you have a subscription
yeah.
and you're paying every month, or even here, in Europe, it's all got so competitive that you can sign up, and
Mhm.
it you don't have any cancellation penalties if you want to switch. Um,
Right.
yeah, I think that's probably one thing that's
No, like in Europe, I know for sure that if you want to, like for example, cancel your number for numbers, say like I don't want to use it anymore, they will give you anything, everything for free, unlimited for 1 year, easy. You
yeah,
can just say like I want to cancel my number. Oh no, 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 we can give you this, and that. It's like, oh, okay.
yes,
But I know I actually use the prepaid one because it's like 8 9 euros, so it's not a big deal. And I don't like contracts in general. I like to pay if someone because I always change my phone number when something annoys me because I don't care. Well, I don't even remember my phone number.
yeah.
Since we have iMessage, WhatsApp, whatever, it doesn't even matter anymore what phone number you have. So I want to have the flexibility to just drop it off in a moment
Yeah,
notice.
it's
Um,
yeah, it's interesting this whole thing of like, again, phone number. I'm the complete opposite. I've had the same phone number for 21 years now.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you get a cake from the operator every year?
No, but I do get like a €1 phone every 18 months from them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Got it.
brand new handset,
Uh,
or a very steep discount on like a premium phone if I wanted. But I can get a
mm,
I can get a I can get a decent handset, €1. So
right.
it's okay.
Out of curiosity, I wonder if you know this, like when it comes to, for example, SIM cards for well, of course you're going to know this. When it comes to SIM cards for IoT,
Yeah,
what options are out there? Like because there's been a bunch of popular companies that try to create SIM cards for IoT, but when you check the data, it's very expensive, right?
yeah,
For the amount of bandwidth that you're sending.
yeah.
Are there less known companies that actually have a good deal? Like, let's say I wanted to put something in a Raspberry Pi a little bit far away, and I want to just, from time to time send data, let's say 1 megabyte, 10 meg, let's say 10 megabytes a day. I want to send it, right?
Sure.
Um,
So
what's out there?
there's some good. There are some really good options. In fact, the market is um, quite competitive. The market has also consolidated quite well
Hmm.
between again, important to distinguish between a sort of a value added service provider. So, again, a company that specializes in supplying connectivity, but
Hmm.
is not an operator and effectively buys wholesale from more than one or one operator. Okay.
Okay.
So, what they'll do is they'll basically can provide options and will typically one of their value adds is to help a customer find the best arrangement for their use cases. Okay,
Mm,
so I add some
okay.
mileage with that. I and then you've got a mix of different operators, right? So obviously, each domestic operator
Hmm.
in Europe, all of them, it's very rare to find an operator that does not have some IoT or machine to machine offer.
Right, but normally if that's the case, for sure, but then that's the case, I see if I go, I want to do my hobby project, they will look at me like, no, the minimum is like, 100 SIM cards.
But that's exactly what I was going to say. So the problem with domestic operators is that they will always be chasing for very large volume contracts.
Mm,
We've got examples of the major telcos here in France, and the same will be true in Italy. They will be
hmm.
looking for example, they'll go and deal with a major utility, the electricity company or the water utility.
Right, yeah.
Say, you guys have got meters and you need to connect, and we'll work with you to put something together for like 10 million electricity meters.
Right. Yeah.
And the crazy thing though is that because a meter tends to send a very small amount of data, these contracts are actually incredibly profitable because the unit
Mm,
cost of conveying kilobytes of data per month for a meter, and you're still
yeah.
charging a per sim fee of €1 €2 per month, right? And
Right. Yeah.
again, these things are always renegotiated over time. But that doesn't deal with your case, right? So it's really
Hmm.
hard. So here's the thing: it's actually really hard to again have some kind of hobby type offer, right?
Hmm.
That isn't going to break your bank or
Right.
okay. And why is it hard? It's because, all right, the overhead of dealing with like one you right
Direct customer. Yeah.
as a direct customer with like, okay, I've got a Pi, I need to I've got some modem I don't know about, right, etc. um and being able to kind of click on a link and say I want a SIM card, and I want, there are very few that have basically specialized in making it easy to
Mm.
buy. Okay,
Right.
um, but there are a couple that could.
So
Um,
because I for example, would like to have, let's say, one SIM card, €1 a month for, and get, I don't know, 20 kilobytes of data per second up and down, right? Or just sending, like have a bandwidth limit that is very narrow, so I cannot, start downloading, watching Netflix on it, but just then pay €1 a month for that, right? Because even if I can go out and buy an €8 SIM card right now in 120 gigabytes, right? But still, that's a lot for a hobby project, right?
well, yeah, and that's a question. Is it right? Is it because if we start looking at the kinds of data, so a sim, a mobile network is always going to be metered in terms of traffic volume, not bandwidth. So to say
What's the
I
difference?
want a SIM card that gives me 20 kilobits per second over, you know, a billing period, a month, right?
Hmm.
If you take kilo 20 kilobit per second, you multiply it by the number of seconds in a month, you'll end up with some total amount of data.
Ah, okay.
And again, to have a unlimited, and I mean they do exist, right? I mean the subscription I have does actually have unlimited data in France
Hmm.
on my phone.
Cool.
And of course, what's nice about being a loyal customer is I've got a second SIM card that's tied off the first subscription. So
Mm.
that's something I use. In fact, that we were using that the last time we recorded the podcast.
Ah, okay. I see.
Okay, so I have a dedicated router and it has the second SIM card that's attached to my subscription.
Hmm.
So that's one way to look at it. You'll also look at like sort of, okay, does your operator have a sort of a loyalty program to get a second SIM card at a discount?
Mm. I see.
Okay,
So,
um,
for a private person, for a hobby project, that could be an option, for
that
example.
could be an option. The thing is though is that yeah, it's normally, unless you're buying a certain type of subscription, and it is fairly rare at the lower end of the market,
Hmm.
because on the lower end of the market there's always going to be some kind of artificial scarcity applied. The reason why you
Hmm.
buy for €8 a month is because they've got a cap on 120 gigs.
Right.
Okay, and there will be, if you exceed 120 gigabytes of data, I'm sure there's some extra charge,
No, it just stops working in that
or it
case.
stops working, right? So
Yeah.
basically, again, this is the thing: is like, all right, well, I'm going to buy something at this price point, and it's limited, right? I mean, I'm still on a subscription deal, which is 10 times more than what you pay per month, right? But one of the
Hmm.
benefits of that is it does truly, again, give me unmetered access to the net and
Hmm.
and a free second SIM card.
Right. No, no, I mean, I barely use my bandwidth on my phone. I just use it for maps and
Right.
music when I'm driving. So I never actually even reach above 40 gigabytes a month. I don't think even I reach
Yeah.
10 because I just literally don't use it for anything else.
Sure, sure, sure. No, no, I can completely understand. But I mean, these are all kind of, again, the differences in the way let's say, the sort of the offers get structured in order to
Hmm.
attract certain clients and repel others. But
Yeah, too bad that there isn't anything like that because that yeah, I mean I understand that the hobby market is not super huge and interesting
right,
for those type of operators,
yeah,
but it's still sad that there isn't anything out there that
right,
try yeah because what's the market, how much you can make. I don't know. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, there's so I, I'm thinking there's a German company which is called One NCE, and
Hmm.
One NCE has a basically an interesting thing is basically it's a prepaid SIM card, and
Hmm.
the data that's loaded on it is valid for 5 years or something, or whatever, or 10 years.
Okay.
Basically, they make a one-time sale. You end up with, I think it's like 500 megabytes. It's for very small, embedded devices.
Okay.
But the thing is that data doesn't expire. So, I mean, one of the tricks in the telecom industry is having data that expires, right? You have 120 gigabytes per month.
Okay, I
You don't
see.
have any carryover, right? You can't
Right.
carry over your balance.
Right.
Okay. Now, these are all artificial things that are limits within a system.
Yeah, no, that I completely understand
You
that.
know,
Yeah, because
I, I know that sometimes when you have an enterprise contract, you can often, again, this becomes a negotiation point, is saying, all right, well, actually, we'll be prepared to commit, for example, for a 1 year, a 3 year, or 5 year contract term. But
mhm.
because we're committing for that, we'd like to be able to carry over unused data.
Hmm.
You say it's 10 gigabytes per SIM card per month. Well, I want those 10 gigabytes to be, multiplied by 60. So I've effectively got 600 gigabytes over 5 years,
Hmm.
because I might not use the data this month, but I might need to use more data the next month, right? So
Right.
how you
Yeah.
do that? There's another technique which is called pooling, which is like the larger the number of SIM cards, I can then basically, have a pool of airtime.
Oh.
Okay, so I've got 10 SIM cards, I've got 10 gigabytes per month per SIM card. It effectively
Hmm.
gives me a pool of 100 gigabytes of data.
Okay, so then every user can. So one user is more heavy a user, so another user is uses less, and you can
Yes,
uh,
exactly.
share across the whole user base the data pool.
Exactly, exactly,
Oh.
exactly. So, there's always a way, okay, and I mean, it's something that,
Yeah, it's still crazy that operate mobile operators still have data caps, and they pretend to say like, "Oh, this is to prevent some end of world situation where you have at home and the office unlimited connections to the internet without any problems, right?"
yeah,
Um, yeah, it's still crazy that they do that,
it
which is weird.
it tends to come down to, again, it's a careful, again, balance between, again, commercial incentives. So, we're charging money for something, and there needs to be an incentive, that, I'm going to buy it, and a reason to buy at that price point. So there's that commercial
Hmm.
part. And then there's also,
Yeah.
yes, something to do with the, let's say, the total usage, the combined usage of all the subscribers on the network. And this becomes a little bit of an academic consideration today, but it's left over from the old days of where the capacity, the total capacity, was that, again, that capacity was contended.
Yeah, I mean, I understand back in the days it was much harder to come by the capacity to attach to every tower, gigabytes of bandwidth
Yeah,
and make it work for everybody in that region.
yeah.
That's understandable. But also you have, for example, ESP providers that give you access to your home network at 1 gigs a second, and you have 100 houses, and everybody gets 1 gig, right? Because somehow they manage to get enough pipes connected to their offices,
Well,
to their building. So,
well,
you know,
that's right, and that's also another interesting subtlety which you also find in the ISP world, and is contention.
because they also in the beginning was say like, no, you're capped, you have this amount of data a month, etc., etc. But then very quickly they went away, at least in Europe, I think, because in the rest they still are poor. Those poor people are still capped in 2022. But in Europe, it went very quickly because people are saying like, no, dude, this is nonsense. Like, you have the bandwidth, so just give it to us, right?
Exactly. And so when the market, I mean, again, it has a lot to do with market, and it has a lot to do with competition and competitivity in the market. The
Mm.
US is quite messed up because there's a lack of competition. Um,
Yeah, they're crazy. I have a SIM card from the US. I paid $7 a month because I don't use it just in case. But yeah, everything you have to pay like per text message still, and you have minutes, and you have this and that. I'm like, oh my god, guys, like what's happening?
the crazy,
But I use it only when I travel there, so at least I have this for same phone number.
yeah,
Uh,
the crazy thing, David, is that I mean, in the US, is paying for incoming phone calls. This was the one thing I could get my head around. Right? Oh, I got a cell phone, and I now have to like, be careful when someone phones me because I'm paying to receive a call.
yeah,
This is like
exactly.
alien.
And that was like I remember the first cell phone that I and my family owned, right? And that was the case. No, was it? Would yeah, I think in the early beginnings it was you also had to pay when something was coming in, but that lasted, I don't know, 2 years, maybe 1 year, something like that, and then it was,
Yeah, it's just unfathomable that on the data side of things, okay, or let's say in the market, right? We're talking
hmm
about data. So yeah, so there's a lack of competition, and again, the way the U.S. geographic kind of markets are kind of like segmented. You'll find there are areas where only one carrier is present. They practically have
yeah,
a
for sure.
monopoly, right? So you
Yeah,
can't
yeah, yeah.
basically switch your the ability to again switch. So in other words, the incumbent or the operator is
hmm
protected against churn. Whereas
Yeah, no, that's for sure.
in Europe, right, churn is part of the new normal, right?
hmm
And so you end up with this kind of competitive war that occurs, and it ends up stabilizing, right? And so that there's now a pretty well known range of different offers in the Italian telecom market.
Yeah, yeah. Now, if you go to France, Germany, whatever, like you're going to have the same packages, then the same offers, the same SIM card for €8 with 100 gigs, and it's going to be very standardized, more or
Yeah,
less.
yeah. I think it's still very country specific, though. If you look at what you get for €8 a month in France versus €8 a month in Italy, okay,
So, how much do you get for €8 on average there?
probably about so typically 40 gigabytes, 50 gigabytes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
it's
okay.
definitely less data. You're not getting 120 gigs for a
That's
consumer
all.
subscription.
Okay. No, but actually, this 120 is a new thing that
Oh,
it's only a few months old, because before it was, I think, 50/60. I don't remember what I had,
okay.
and now they changed it to 120.
Okay,
Um,
so this could also be in the process of changing here. I know that I got a
yeah.
crazy email from my cell operator for my
Uh-huh.
kids' subscription. So I know they're both on €8 a month like plans, and they get there's 40
And how
gigs
old
of
are they?
data. basically saying, "Oh yeah, in the next few months we're going to be like doubling, or we're going to be increasing the amount of like data you have,
Hmm.
and it'll only be an extra €3 per month, and we'll automatically adjust
Only.
your contract, right?" So like,
Uh,
come on, man. And this operator plus others here have already been dinged by the regulator, or there've been
uh-huh.
complaints made to the regulator saying, look, this is not a fair business practice. You can't just, basically tell a customer, hey, we're giving you more and we're charging you more, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So the way they've, again, made peace with the regulator is that there's an opt out, right? So, but I have to
So you have to
explicitly,
physically say no.
yeah,
Okay.
physically go to the customer, the subscriber profile, and say, no, I don't want this.
Crazy.
Yeah,
That's bonkers.
but
I remember once there was an operator that was saying there was some I don't remember what was it exactly, but you were getting a very good deal, like almost too good to be true. The thing is, they were giving you a free, or with that deal, they were giving you a free subscription to the night antivirus that you would have to pay then €10 a month, right? And you go to them and they say like, yeah, by the way, you will have to do this, but don't worry, you can always cancel it. Like, really? How many people will cancel it? Like, how easy are you making it to be able to cancel it? Like, how many hours do I have to spend on the phone to canceling this thing, right? I said like, no, 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 thank you. That's good luck with that.
yeah, exactly. And so you find some really funny things that kind of get bundled in. Um,
Yeah.
and, you know, yeah, the value of that. I mean, and this is just like it's jam on the bread for the seller, for the ISP or the operator.
Uh,
It's jam, pure
yeah.
jam, you know. And anyway,
Yeah.
so yeah, so
Go ahead.
look, I'm just saying, no, to come back to your SIM card story, I'm sure there's a way, right? And maybe this is something that I could go back, think about. Next time we talk, we might actually have a couple of options. But I need to go and, because what I do, or what my company does, is we do include cellular connectivity that we sell to our customers. So I already have a
Uh-huh.
relationship. Okay, and I'm very happy to talk about this. Is that we use a company, or we work with a company called Jersey Telecom. Okay, and there's a good
Okay.
reason why we work with Jersey Telecom and not with other operators. So Jersey Telecom,
Is that Jersey Telecom in Jersey in the United States?
no, Jersey
Uh-huh.
in the Channel Islands. So Jersey is a crown dependency. Okay, it's a special
Ah,
territory.
okay.
It's not part of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland,
Oh, okay.
but it is still under the authority of the Queen of, the United Kingdom. Right?
Interesting.
So
Right.
it's and again, it's a very special case, right? There are two territories in basically close to the United Kingdom, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
Jersey, and actually it's Jersey and Guernsey. It's a set of islands that are closer to France than to England.
Oh, okay.
And then there's the Isle of Man, which is in the Irish Sea between Ireland, the island of Ireland, and
Uh-huh.
Great Britain.
Okay.
Okay. And these have special jurisdictions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they have different rules compared to the rest of the United Kingdom. So Jersey
Right.
Telecom is actually a sovereign operator because it's a
Ah,
piece of territory. It's the same as Monaco, for example.
I see. Okay.
Monaco Telecom is a sovereign operator.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, you probably know that the Vatican also has its own telecom as well.
Yes, I heard about it.
Right.
Yeah, they have the same post office,
Yes.
train station, and all of that.
Correct. 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 San Marino
Mm-hmm.
and Andorra.
Right. Yes.
Okay. So you have these little territories which are, again, Andorra is a crazy example of like who
Right.
actually rules or is the authority over Andorra, right?
What do you mean?
In terms of head of
Why?
state, who's the
What,
actual head of?
there's the Andorians, like the citizens.
No, the head of state, right? So in other words, then in terms of the like the authority, the president, right? There isn't a president of.
There isn't?
No,
Oh, okay. I had no idea. I mean, I thought there's just I know that there's the government there that rules over Andorra, right?
no, 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 no,
No.
no, 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 no. So who
Oh.
are who are the heads of state? So there's actually two. Is a co-responsibility for the Principality of Andorra.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I knew that they have the government is very small and they're just chill and keep on going.
Yes, but the heads of state or the co-head of state is really curious.
So how does it work? Do you know?
Yeah.
Okay, that tell me.
So
I'm very interested in this one. Then we can go back to the SIM card
yeah,
thing.
sure, sure. So one of the co-heads of state is a bishop, right? The bishop of the
Okay.
diocese of Urgell in Catalonia in Spain,
Uh-huh.
and the other co-head of state is the president of France.
What?
Yep. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
That's a little bit of European.
I have to do some research on it. This is interesting.
Yeah,
This is very interesting.
exactly.
Okay, go back to the island. So what's
Sure.
up with this
So,
operator?
anyways, Jersey Telecom is also an example, but they're the really when it comes to their network, when it comes to their ability to craft or to negotiate roaming agreements with
Hmm.
hundreds of again sovereign operators around the world, and and not only sovereign operators, but basically telecom operators around the world,
Hmm.
they end up with a very competitive offer for connectivity, for cellular connectivity for IoT.
Uh-huh. Ah, okay.
Okay,
And
and not just
how do they
IoT.
achieve that?
Sorry.
How do they achieve that? Like how like how many people do they need to have connection in every country and with every operator?
So this is again this is part of the black art of mobile
Ah,
telecoms, right? It's
okay.
again it's kind of like the the trade-off, but typically small small sovereign operators, so small countries.
Hmm.
Jersey is an example, Andorra is another example, Monaco is
Hmm.
another example, right? So small states
Hmm.
tend to go from one extreme. They're kind of extremes. So they either negotiate very favorable roaming agreements,
Okay.
okay, where the settlement between the
Okay.
roaming partner and the operator
Hmm.
is like really small, and they do that
Hmm.
deliberately. And they basically say, "Hey, listen, we're going to be very, we're going to be very, how can we say? We're going to be very generous about this." Okay.
Okay.
All right. The other extreme is we're going to be very greedy about it, where we're going
Hmm.
to set a barrier. We're going to charge a lot, and we're going to expect to be charged a lot. So they set high
Okay.
roaming, they have a higher roaming agreement. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, and it's all got to do with strategy, with politics, and with again the why you would want to be high, why you'd want to be low. But again, I'm kind of reading between the lines here. But what's made Jersey an
Mm.
interesting case is it's an important financial services center.
Ah, okay.
Okay, but also has a very modern telecom infrastructure as well.
Okay.
Okay, and it does make a lot of sense that you would want, if you've got, for example, let's say high net worth people coming to Jersey because of financial services, because it does have a different tax jurisdiction compared to the
Right.
United Kingdom. So if you're high net worth folks and you want to be able to encourage people to come, you don't want to penalize them by charging them a lot of money when they use their mobile phone.
Mm.
So
And
you
plus, they have, I guess, they have connections. They can ask, do you know this guy, is that guy, and
exactly. So you would basically set up an environment that's favorable and has low cost, roaming when visitors come to the country. But you don't get a lot
Mhm.
of visitors, right? It's not like a high volume market. Okay.
Right.
So in any way, basically to kind of build out volume, it's interesting for these very small micro states, right, to again uh, be known as a, let's say, as a good value for money roaming operator.
Hmm.
You know, so
Mm.
get a subscription with Jersey Telecom. You're never going to use the SIM card, right? Most people. I mean, I haven't ever used a JT IoT SIM card in Jersey, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, on the home network, but
Right.
okay, I'm going to use it just about anywhere in the world.
Hmm.
So that's kind of like a good bit of positioning. So what does that mean? That means that actually everywhere you go, you're going to be roaming.
Yes.
Okay, and that's very advantageous because it means that in some countries, okay, and this is what places continental European operators at a disadvantage, is that they have
Okay.
a home market, they have a domestic market.
Ah.
I could give a great example about a Dutch operator, a well-known Dutch operator, and I'm not going to name names because I mean, but it's a very well-known Dutch operator, right?
Yeah.
This Dutch operator was basically selected by a French
Hmm.
service provider, right?
Yeah. Wait a second. Oh, wait. I have a B.
Ah,
Like, oh, no, no worry. I think she was trying to find a home.
oh
New
man.
home.
Well,
Oh well.
there you go. Pest control done.
Pest control done.
Nice little
Yes. So sorry.
break in the
Continue.
conversation. Anyway, so yeah, so anyway, example: Dutch operator. I'm not going to name names. Gets selected by a French company. French company
Yeah.
uses it to do a Europe-wide deployment of electric vehicle charging stations.
Okay.
Okay, so everything's good until there's a incident with the Dutch operator on
Mm-hmm.
their home network.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and this was all got to do with the whole upgrades of again upgrading the network. But basically, there was an
Mm-hmm.
entire area in the Netherlands that lost coverage for a day, more
Wow.
than a day, right? So it's a major incident. Okay, and
Mm-hmm.
so for multiple hours, there was no coverage, and the SIM cards, right, could not roam onto another Dutch network because
Ooh.
it was a domestic SIM card, right? So this is
Yeah.
where you get bitten sometimes, and this is also why it's generally a very bad idea to sit down and negotiate with your domestic operator, even if you have a complete domestic use case, right? The only time it makes sense to sit down with a domestic operator is if all of your business is in that country
Mm-hmm.
and you can be sure that you're in coverage. But again, it's a very dangerous thing to do because if you have a major network failure with one of the operators, you won't be able to switch and roam onto one of the others.
Ah, I see. Okay, so if you have a SIM card that roams everywhere, you rely, let's say, in a country has three operators and one fails, you can still switch to those other tools.
Yeah. Or if you have a coverage gap, right? So this is something that you might find in the mountains, is that the location of cell towers isn't the same for
Right.
all
So yeah, exactly. So
areas.
that's the situation with my friend that she is from outside of Italy, and where I don't have coverage, she still has a little bit, or at least one bar, because she's using a different operator
Yep,
automatically, right?
correct.
Yeah, yeah,
Correct. And
yep,
because you're
yep, yep.
using a foreign SIM card on roaming, you
Yeah.
tend to have the ability to switch between operators and do that automatically. In fact, you'll notice.
So that's interesting. So your IoT devices has also a backup network, like they use whatever operator is available, has the strongest signal,
Yeah,
and you don't have to worry if one goes down, there's still connectivity.
and that's a major. It's a major advantage, particularly for IoT
Mm,
devices, right?
interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's you actually blew my mind with this. It's a simple idea, and now it's obvious. Like, of course, that's what you want to do. That's the strategy that you want to do with your IoT device.
Yeah. So become
Crazy.
yeah. So this is also where again, sadly to say, politics does tend to come into this, right? Because you'll find
Mm-hmm.
that in some, you know, geographic markets, particularly where there's a national interest, and we're talking now mainly about utilities. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so all right, so I've got the national power company. All right,
Mm-hmm.
I have a national telecom operator.
Yes.
Okay, and what you probably find is you probably find in Italy and France this would be probably true is that the government actually has some shareholding in those state, utilities.
Ah, right. Yeah.
Now think about
Mm-hmm.
Telecom Italia, right? Telecom Italia
Yeah. No, of
was the
course.
old
That's the
PTT, right? The old
yeah.
and once upon a time it was a state-owned
Oh, yeah.
entity. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
your electricity,
Also
exactly.
was
All right. We have exactly the same
okay.
case in France, and
Yeah.
so then there's some kind of like again the politics.
Yeah. And now it's called it's private. It's like yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's
private. It's
privatized.
kind of
However, it's still and politically you encourage. Well, hey, don't go. Electricity utility. Don't buy from, for example, another nation state. Even if
yeah.
actually technically quality wise operationally it's actually more interesting
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
you build a more
But
resilient
one
infrastructure.
case, one funny case that we had here in Italy is, and I don't know how it is in France, that you have to pay for because we have public TV
Mm-hmm.
made by the
Yeah,
state, right? So you have Rai Uno, Rai Due, Rai Tre, and some other stuff,
yeah.
and it's free to watch, right? But you have to pay a yearly fee.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a TV in your house, by law, you should
Yeah,
pay this fee,
it's
right?
a
Because
type
the assumption is you're going to watch
it's
it.
a type of tax,
Um,
and again in the English speaking world, it's known as a TV license.
okay.
Okay.
And what they've done is they added this charge in your electricity bill.
Oh,
They literally embedded it there, so there's no chance that you cannot pay it.
that's fascinating. So here in France,
Yeah.
that is actually tacked onto your income tax.
Oh, interesting. There you
When
go.
you declare
Uh,
when you declare your income tax, right? There's something where, and again, it sticks. It's known in the system. The minute you have a TV in your house, you have to check a box,
exactly, and you pay
and
it.
now it's called. I mean, it's in French. It's known as a redevance
Mm-hmm.
audiovisuelle. So it's basically
Ah, the visual.
the
Okay.
contribution that you know anyone who possesses a TV set. All right,
Mm-hmm.
it's a contribution for state-funded TV and radio.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But the thing is, like, yeah, the state said to put it there, and now the EU said, like, no, 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 you cannot do that.
Yeah,
And then said, okay, so sorry. And now they did it in a way that you still have to pay it. But I don't remember what was the story. We still paid somehow with some sort of taxes, some sort of scheme
sure.
there. but the crazy thing, but the only one good interesting thing is that you actually get all those channels that are free in air quotes for streaming for free. You can
Yeah.
literally go
So
to the website and you go Rayuno and you can just watch it live without paying anything inside of the Italy, right?
absolutely. So,
So that was like a nice surprise when I realized. I was like, holy crap, they truly do it for free, right? So that's, I mean, I don't watch it because there's nothing interesting there, but it's an interesting thing that I did.
same here. So same here. So it's known as France Télévision, right? Which is the state
Uh-huh.
broadcaster, and so you've got 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you've also got
Okay.
France Info, and so
All
anyway, so
right.
there's
So
a
you do
whole
this thing.
group of different channels. What's
Mm-hmm.
interesting is that the first channel, so TF1, is not actually part of France Television. It's separate. It's kind of
Oh.
interesting when you look at the kind of way the broadcast landscape has changed. You know, you have stations that became privatized, or stations that were
Ah, okay.
always intended to be private or run as a hybrid kind of public-private partnership. You see this in the
Mm-hmm.
United Kingdom between the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, which is the state
Mm-hmm.
public broadcaster. You have ITV, and then you also have Channel 4, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm not an expert in the UK
Yeah,
in
no,
the
I
UK.
just was
Yeah, I
mentioning
mean, I didn't watch
contrast.
TV for now. Yeah, yeah.
But
But yeah, I didn't watch TV for the past 15 years. I don't even know like what's going on there. Because yeah, I own a TV, but I was always online since the beginning
I
of that.
I find sometimes that getting some again some certain types of media. I don't know. I'm one of these folks where I like to try and have a range of media input. And so
Uh huh.
I'll deliberately take a couple of moments, not every day, not for hours, but to basically
Mm-hmm.
look at what does, for example, French public broadcaster, so France Info for me is a channel that I will deliberately carve out a little bit of time just to catch headlines
Mm.
and a piece of the news cycle. But I'll also do the same
Okay.
with BBC,
Uh huh.
and I'd also do the same with a couple of other channels that are around, just simply to kind of get a range. And but again, that's perhaps a topic for our next call, is to talk about kind of like
Yes.
how do we, for example, keep track of current affairs so that
Mm.
we are able to not fall into some kind of bias, right?
Oh yeah, that would be a nice topic because I have some thoughts on that and have my own strategies
Yeah.
around it. So that could be an interesting chat for sure.
Definitely, definitely, because some folks who know me kind of tend to be somewhat horrified when I tell them about some of the sources of kind of like news or current affairs that I'll go to, which are known as like either conservative or or very
Hmm.
extreme. But again, it's that whole range. But that's another, as I say, that could be an interesting topic to kind of
Yeah,
understand
yeah,
your
for sure.
strategies and share a couple of my thoughts on sort of how I try to,
Yeah.
I guess, not feel too crazy sometimes.
Right. By the way, we have the same amount of light for now.
Yeah, incredible, which
So
we didn't have
yeah,
before.
last time, yeah. So I guess the Earth is round and it's spinning
Yeah, it's good.
and it's tilting.
Um, but I
Yeah.
imagine that probably within half an hour, maybe it'll start to get dark for you.
Yeah, you're good. Yeah, in 30, like that, let me check. Yeah, in 41 minutes, it's going to be dark.
Great. And so for us, we've probably got about maybe another 30 minutes on top of that.
Uh huh. Okay. Oh, okay. Yes, you have like almost an hour
Yeah,
extra.
we got probably about an hour extra for it to be completely dark. But well, that's the last
Okay.
time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, yeah,
Yeah, because now the nights are like the day are longer and longer, so we get covered with the same
but
amount of light
also
now.
let's bear in mind that the difference would be. even more extreme if I was in the area I was the last time we recorded our podcast,
Oh, so that
because
was
I
like
was
on the west side.
750 kilometers west of where I'm currently located.
Ah, okay.
It was actually on, let's say, on how can I say? I was kind of like a bit further, a little bit further west than the Greenwich Meridian, the where GMT
Oh,
is.
okay.
Yeah, a little bit further west than where London's located.
Yeah.
So again, that's
Oh, wait. So France. Wait, what? So France. Wait, how many time zones does France have?
just one. But the very west part of France
It's
is kind of like should be on the same time zone as the United Kingdom, but it isn't, right?
okay because logic, of course. Yeah, yeah,
Well,
makes sense.
well, exactly, and that's perhaps another conversation for another time because the whole history
Yeah.
of the rivalry between Paris and London as to where the 0 hour should be
Oh,
is an
really?
interesting conundrum, right? And the
Oh,
English basically won that battle, right? And that's
wow.
why we have
Interesting.
GMT, Greenwich Meridian Time, right?
Mm,
Why the
I like it.
longitude starts at 0 and it cuts through Greenwich in the UK. I don't. Have you ever visited the
Right.
Greenwich Meridian in
No,
Greenwich in
no,
London,
no, no, no,
outside
no,
London?
no.
It's a fascinating
No,
place
no,
to
no, no,
visit.
no. Okay, that's a good point. Because no, like the UK is not a place that I'm drawn to for
Okay,
like any reason. Like I literally that place does not exist in my head. No offense to people from the UK, but it's not a country that
no, no, no,
doesn't even register.
no.
But yeah, that's a good point. Like I want to maybe this year go and visit a bunch of museums in different countries. I want to do that. Um, because why? Because I've never been for a while in any.
Mm,
The last one that I've been was in New York. The big one, the Smithsonian. I don't remember what the name is. In New York, they have like attached to the Central Park, so I'm close to the Central Park. This one big
the
museum.
Natural History Museum.
Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. I think so. So that was fun, and then later I got reminded of that and said, like, you know what, I should go and visit something.
The other great
So
place to
that's a good
visit
point.
in New York is MoMA, is the Museum of Modern Art.
No, yeah, I didn't go to that one. I didn't have time.
Definitely recommend that. And then
Okay.
if you do want, or if anyone who's listening to this wants to see a very interesting museum, which again, if when you come and visit here, where I'm located,
Mhm.
I'll take you there. It's in a
Okay.
town nearby where I live called Vizille, and it's the National Museum of the French Revolution.
Ooh,
Yes,
that's interesting.
because this
Okay.
is actually inside the place where the French Revolution was started, where the actual, let's say,
Wow.
all the pre, let's say all the preparation that led to
Hmm.
declaring a state of revolution, right? This is where it
Yeah.
happened. And
Okay. That sounds very
the
interesting.
history behind the property where this happened is fascinating because it directly links with the circumstances and the reasons for, again, having this revolution, and also
Hmm.
understanding that popular understanding of this revolution, it wasn't exactly what most people think it was all
Think,
about.
of course.
It's a lot more
Yeah, yeah,
subtle.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, yeah. Of course, like, I can imagine. Like everything in life. Okay. So,
Yeah,
having said that, thank you for watching. Please subscribe and like, however that works. And see you next time.
yeah, like, subscribe, share
Bye.
as well, and make sure
Share, yes.
you spread the word. Because look, this is new, so our second episode of the technological
Yeah.
mind meld. So we could
Yep.
always say live long and prosper, right? as
Of course. Yeah.
as Spock would say, and maybe we'll get a chance next time to also talk about all the new Star Trek that's on, because
Oh, I don't know if we can. It's allowed.
well, we can always talk about the fact that there is some great new stuff, and we're not going to
Yeah.
spoil anything. But yeah, I mean, the mind meld happened, and thank you, David, for your time. And
Thank you,
um,
Matthew.
we'll see you on the next
See you next
episode.
time.
All right. Take
Bye.
care. Bye, everyone.
Okay.